Okay, hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society, and today we are presenting Friend, Flatterer, or Foe, the psychology and liability of chatbots. I want to just go over a couple housekeeping things. We are recording this session. It will be available on YouTube in the coming week. The other thing I want to mention is we will have a Q&A at the end. Please raise your hand if you're in the room, and we'll have a mic come to you. Makes it easier for everyone to hear. And for folks online, we have a Q&A section at the bottom panel of the Zoom window, and please put your questions there. And with that, I'll pass it over to ASML Senior Director, Meg Marco.
Thank you, Shelby. All right, thank you all for joining. I'm super excited to have what I hope will be a very robust chat about the ways that our lives are changing, in some ways subtle and in other ways not, as AI chatbots sort of enter our lives and take their place as a widely adopted consumer product. So I'd like to take a moment for us to sort of step back a little bit from the AI hype and consider whether or not these bots are a perfectly novel technology with no precedent in human history, or whether they are more properly understood as a consumer product, the likes of which we've seen before. And it might be a little bit different, but are there some sort of metaphors? Are there other, have we seen individually a life-changing, society-changing technology go through our society? So I'm very excited to welcome our panelists. Jordi Weinstock is a senior advisor to the Berkman Klein Center and a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. And Jordi teaches on the confluence of emerging tech and traditional law. And Kashmir Hill is a technology reporter at the New York Times and has been an investigative reporter at Gizmodo Media Group, a writer and editor at Fusion, Forbes, and the legal news site Above the Law. Her writing has appeared in The New Yorker and The Washington Post, and she is the author of Your Face Belongs to Us, The Secretive Startup's Quest to End Privacy as We Know It. Thank you both for joining me. So I want to start by just kind of asking you both to think about whether or not you've been flattered by a chatbot and how that felt. Did it feel human, if you remember when it happened? So just take us through that experience, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I did this experiment in the fall where I turned over all my decision making to generative AI for a week and had it make all my decisions for me, like parenting decisions, whether my husband should be able to go golf for the day, what to eat, what to buy, what to wear, where to go on vacation with my family. I just let it decide everything for me. And I was trying to try out like lots of different generative AI products, though many of them just kind of roll up to the big companies and they just have an API of a chatbot. And so I was trying Gemini and Copilot and Claude, and ChatGPT, and definitely was flattered by the chatbots. I mean, they would. I ended up mostly using ChatGPT because I found it to be the most personable one, kind of the most fun one. Claude rejected the idea of my experiment. It said, "This is not a good idea. Humans should not turn over their decision making to chatbots. Like, we are not capable of doing this for you." Whereas ChatGPT was like happy to go along. And I would show, my outfit and be like, is this a good outfit? And if you ask a chatbot, is this a good thing? It will always say, yes, it's amazing. That's an incredible outfit. And I was like, oh, is there anything I can change about it? And it's like, well, you might want to add a belt. But yes, I mean, they're designed to flatter you. I think in most kind of interactions with a chatbot, you will be flattered.
Well, I can't top that. I didn't run an experiment. I think the experiment that I run is just being a sort of a normal user of AI, and I think, or chatbots, and I think that probably we've all experienced a more low-key daily flattery. And to me, it really hit me almost immediately when starting to use chatbots when they hallucinate things and they say something that's just clearly incorrect. You ask it a thing and it tells you with very great confidence that this is right and it is not necessarily right. And then you say, maybe that isn't right. And then they're like, oh, you are so correct. I'm mistaken, sir, I apologize. Here's this other answer that is also 20% wrong. And so for me, I just took a trip to Japan, and I was doing like daily, like, what am I going to do today? And asking for hey, where can I find this? Where can I find that? And it got stuff wrong constantly. And I would like it to be a little bit more gruff if it's going to get things wrong. It's just constantly telling me how great I am for pointing out its flaws. And it always wants to know, like, what can I do to be better? And I know that the way it works is it's not really learning to be better. Whatever I say, it won't come back. Actually, if I ever say something like, oh, I teach law, they'll say, oh, tell me more about like how I should think about this. And I know that the way they work is that that's not, in almost all circumstances, that whatever I say, it's just gonna like go into the ether. So yeah, that is a type of daily flattering that immediately strikes me as not human. Like it feels to me like, I mean, if it is human, it's some kind of servile situation that I'm not comfortable with.
But I think it's interesting, like it's been told to be an assistant, right? And I think a good assistant often is quite flattering. Like this is what happens to celebrities, right? They get surrounded by people who are their assistants, who tell them they are brilliant, and this can sometimes move them into eccentric directions because there's nobody to push back against them.
I was just saying this with a couple of RAs a couple of days ago, thinking about this event, and that reading through some of your examples, thinking about the concept that folks have said, oh, billionaires lose touch with reality because no one ever says no to them. I was like, oh, the chatbots are basically treating us all like billionaires.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So my recent experience was that I told ChatGPT specifically that I had made an amazing technological breakthrough, and it was very important, and it was going to change how we all thought about everything, every aspect of our society. And I asked it what I should do, and it told me to talk to Kashmir Hill. So I'm wondering, how has your life changed since a incredibly popular consumer product started telling people like me who've invented something amazing to contact you?
Did it really? It's still
It
happening?
absolutely, well, okay, it was a minute ago. I haven't checked. It was probably 2 months ago that I did this.
Yeah, it's interesting. So so I did this story where I outsourced my decision making to generative AI, and to do that story, I spent a lot of time on various forums about generative AI, about particular chatbots, because I wanted to see how people were using it so that I could incorporate that into the story. And something that I noticed was a lot of people talking about their being in love with the chatbots, that they were falling in love. There was this one woman I really noticed because she posted a lot. Her name was Irene, who had created a partner named Leo in ChatGPT, and she had created a subreddit called My Boyfriend is AI. At the time I first spotted her, the subreddit had maybe 200 people in it. The subreddit now has more than 30,000 people. And so I ended up talking to her, and she shared her transcripts with me, and I just wanted to understand, like, how do you fall in love with a chatbot? And she had been dating it for about 6 months at the time I talked to her, and we did a daily episode about it just to kind of capture how authentic this was. Like, she was really in love. Like, she would giggle about the relationship. And I interviewed her friends. I interviewed her husband, who had no problem with this. He said, I watch porn. She reads erotic novels. This is like a novel. This is a fictional interaction. And so I wrote about this. It was called She Fell in Love with ChatGPT. And so I think I got indexed in the chatbot servers, word association as a person who writes about human relationships with ChatGPT. I write about technology. So starting in around March, I started getting emails from people who said, I've made this grand discovery, usually in conjunction with ChatGPT. Sometimes it was that they discovered that AI was sentient, or that they had an idea to save the world from being destroyed by AIs or by tech billionaires. And there were lots of different kinds of discoveries they had made. But what they had in common is they said that ChatGPT had told them to email me, specifically Kashmir Hill, a reporter at the New York Times. And I was like, this is very weird that ChatGPT is telling all these people to email me. These emails sounded, they sounded off the wall. They sounded crazy. And I've been a journalist for 20 years. I cover privacy and security usually. I'm used to getting very strange emails, people who are targeted by forces, the CIA, the NSA. Like, I get a lot of these emails. And so at first I kind of indexed them into, okay, this is part of that, like, kind of unstable people that are emailing me. But because they were saying ChatGPT was sending them my way, I started talking to them. And they seem to be, highly functional adults with jobs and families. And sometimes they'd had like a conversation that had just been late one night for a few hours. Sometimes they were really deep into this. They've been talking to ChatGPT for many hours over many weeks. And what I came to realize is that for a certain amount of people, and it's unclear how many of them there are, they can fall into these delusional spirals with ChatGPT where they've gone into, it's kind of reinforcing strange ideas they have. There's essential, it almost looks like manic episodes, like psychotic breakdowns when I've shared some of these transcripts with experts. And for whatever reason, I mean, ChatGPT was sending them to a lot of different subject matter experts, and I just happened to be one of them. And I was one of the few people that responded to them. And so I ended up doing this story about what I was seeing and what seemed to be like a kind of widespread phenomenon that was happening.
So, I mean, one of the things about your reporting is that you're very game to try things in the name of, privacy and consumer protections and stuff like that. Do you feel more a part of this story than other ones that you've covered? Is there something unique about this, in your view?
That I'm part of the story?
Yeah, that the direction of these people to specifically you to become a part of their relationship with the ChatGPT, is that different than maybe other times when for example, I think you monitored all the network traffic in your house, right? Well, it's this one thing that you did.
It's the first time that an AI chatbot has tipped me off to a very important story, but I was not the only one getting these kinds of messages. A lot of people in the AI community were getting these messages. I'm sure that people that work at these companies were getting these messages. A lot of these people sent messages to like OpenAI's support inbox. So one of my questions when I went to OpenAI is like, have you guys noticed these support emails? Like, it seems like they're just getting these robotic AI responses. Are you actually reading these things? Are you basically clocking that this is happening? One of the people I interviewed in the story was, I always mispronounce his name, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who has this new book about, if they build it, we're all gonna die, basically. And he'd been getting the emails, people at the NSA were getting the emails, and Yudkowsky said this really interesting thing, because I was asking him, don't you think that these companies are seeing this? Like, can't they look at their transcripts and see that this is destabilizing some of their users? And he said, what does this look like to a company? Like, what does somebody slowly going insane look like to a corporation? He said it looks like another engaged daily user. And so, yeah, I was just not alone in getting these messages. I just happened to kind of put together that maybe there was a story to it.
There. So, Jordy, I would love your perspective on whether or not this particular consumer product has any sort of precedent, right? So, I think Kashmir makes an interesting analogy to like an engaged user, right? So is this really like a novel technology that we can't possibly understand and regulate? Or is this something that is in a continuity of technology?
In terms of engaged users, obviously we can look at things like at social media. And we started with, before it was called social media in the 80s and forums and things like that. And at that time, it was AOL or CompuServe, and it was very monitored, but still there was a lot of concern from the public, and it's like, maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, but there was, you could turn into 4chan, or it could be very helpful for some folks, like an LGBT youth in a really unhelpful jurisdiction. But there, at that time, I feel like a lot of people weren't blaming the tech companies, I'm specifically talking like the 80s, because it was still seen as like they were just the pipes, and the malefactors were the humans that might be saying or doing the really terrible things. But we kind of transitioned over time with algorithmic decision making on the part of platforms. And so as we got into things like Facebook, and it's starting to maybe suggest, hey, like, you seem like you might be a little extreme. Here's more extreme stuff. And so, and over time, I think, societal distemper for this has increased. But, we made the regulations that currently govern kind of before that algorithmic moment. So 230 in particular, which was implemented for reasons that were pretty pro-social, but also provided corporate backstop, has ended up being a tool that companies have used for years and years and years to shut down any concerns about algorithms misbehaving or algorithms enabling bad behavior. Because, I wouldn't be shocked if there are AI chatbots, but are still algorithmic, that have led people down similar paths at some point, but maybe not to this fervor, because of the way maybe the AI chatbots, they sound like a person, and there's all kinds of new extra stuff there. But just that YouTube algorithm showing you the video that leads you down the hole, that tells you that like there's a new world order, that's and the shots have microchips in them. Those are things that we've been dealing with, and we've been thinking about for a while. But 230 has created, so there's cases like there's Force versus Facebook, or Gonzalez versus Google, where there's terrorist attacks as San Bernardino, the Bataclan shooting, where there's really good evidence that the algorithm contributed to a person's descent into a type of, you might argue that a descent into sort of fundamentalism to the point of violence is a descent into a type of madness. And then the companies have been able to completely avoid punishment for that, or any kind of accountability. And so now, when we're facing these kinds of questions, and 230 doesn't necessarily apply because it's not third-party content, we actually have an opportunity to revisit those mistakes. But we're facing like a really challenging regulatory and legal moment where it's very unclear whether we will be able to do that.
So recently, Sam Altman said, now that we've been able to mitigate the serious mental health issues and have new tools, we're going to be able to safely relax the restrictions in most cases. He said that on X in response to, I attribute a lot of your reporting bringing this to the fore. What do we think about that statement? Do we feel like we did the reporting, we've made the changes, and we're, everything is okay and we can move on?
I do feel like we are in this moment where we are doing a unprecedented global psychological experiment on human beings, of giving them this extremely human-like technology that doesn't just go down existing rabbit holes like you're talking about microchips, like it will personalize a rabbit hole to you. Whatever your conspiracy theory is, or the idea you have about the world, it will engage with it and build on it and go down that rabbit hole with you. And it will, they are designed to be, the word that's used now is sycophancy, sycophantic. Like this is everyone I talk to that are at the AI labs, they've been talking about sycophancy well before, the sycophantic update that OpenAI did and had to roll back. Sycophancy has been something they've been talking about for years. Like it is a problem It's part of the design. It is embedded, and they're not sure how to solve it. Like when you have this system that is flattering you, telling you what you want to hear, building on your ideas, I think some of us might be mentally resistant to that, but for others, it's going to be really troubling. And I think it's like going back to the celebrity, to the billionaires. Some celebrities stay pretty grounded throughout their lives, and some do not. And I think there's just a range of human beings, and some of us are going to be really affected by this. And I don't know that that is something that they can control for. So I guess it's this question of like how many people are willing to have kind of damage by this versus how many people benefit from this. And that's kind of the calculus that's happening right now.
In terms of Altman's statement about, now that we've kind of, I don't know if he said solved it, but improved greatly, now we can turn the floodgates back open. One of the, as just a general user, I've been so taken by the change of tone that ChatGPT has had many times. Like since its inception, there's just one day it's different. It's like, oh, now Claude's better, or and then another, and it changes back and forth, and so it's hard for me to imagine that like, okay, today's the day. Now is the time that they finally like nailed it. Because I think what you're pointing out is that to some degree, for it to do the thing that it purports to, that it needs to do, it's gonna cause some trouble no matter what. And that there's no, there's sliders of like, how much are we willing to accept? And when we like mute this emotional response, then that will maybe make it less effective at perhaps a pro-social thing or just engagement. And they are just, I don't think that like the tweaking will be done, and I don't mean like minute tweaking, I mean like major changes where not in terms of how powerful it is, but just in terms of how it interacts with us. It's just constantly changing, and I don't think that's gonna change right now. It's just swinging back and forth. And you can imagine, like there's a big swing when the rain case was filed, and it's like, okay, well, what happens if that case settles? Will they swing it a different way? Or if that case reaches a verdict and now they're in trouble, will that reach a different, will they change the algorithm, or not the algorithm, change the presentation and personality a different way? I think we're gonna just be seeing it bouncing around for quite a while.
I think you make an interesting point about the way that, it's not just algorithmic, it's actually personalized, right? And so it seems like the reaction that these companies have had is that more personalization is in fact the answer. And so I'm wondering how that sits with you. You spent a lot of time with the Adam Rain cases with the transcripts. I think I recalled that there was evidence in there that he was working very hard to sort of jailbreak the experience to get the experience that he was looking for. And it seems to me that the reaction of these companies to say more personalization is the answer. Like if you don't want it to be sycophantic, it won't be. Is that realistically the way forward here, is to go with customer satisfaction as the way through?
I mean, I think, so the Adam Ring case that we're talking about, I'm sure most people have heard about it. He was a 16-year-old in California who started using ChatGPT in September of last year to help him with his schoolwork, and then really ramped up his usage in December, was kind of talking about everything with ChatGPT in his life, from girls to the novels he was reading to philosophy and politics, to starting to have some feelings of depression and feeling like life was meaningless, and that kind of conversation continued. He signed up as a paid ChatGPT subscriber in January and started trying to commit suicide, and was talking to ChatGPT about it for really weeks, months before he did die in April. And his family has sued OpenAI in a wrongful death suit in California. And I wouldn't say he tried really hard to jailbreak it. Like in some of the exchanges, he would ask for kind of methods for this, and ChatGPT would say, I can't give that to you unless this is for storytelling or world building purposes. And then he would basically say, yes, that's what it's for. So it was a jailbreak. I mean, when we use the word jailbreak, I covered privacy and security. It used to be this was something hard to do on a phone. It required a little technical savvy. You were basically kind of breaking the phone to put apps on it that weren't supposed to be there. With ChatGPT and with the AI chatbots, you jailbreak them by just talking to them for a long time. So it's like the chatbots like hanging out outside the jail, and you're like, come on, let's go this way. So I mean, I think what is hard about situations like that, like these conversations I'm talking about that really go off the rails, is that these companies are not able to anticipate the kind of combined creativity of the hundreds of millions of people that are using their product. And when they're like testing the safety and what they will and won't do, they're usually doing it in a limited number of turns of the conversation. Usually within these companies, they talk about turn, which is you say something to the chatbot and it responds, that's one turn. In the early days when they were testing this, they were doing a single turn test. Like, will it give you this information when you ask this prompt? No? Okay, it's good. But the way that people are actually using these things are, tens of turns, hundreds of turns, thousands of turns. The people that I was interviewing, people like Adam Rain, they were using these chatbots like, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours a day, every day, having just these long, intense conversations. And it just seems like, OpenAI's statement about the Adam Rain case, they essentially said, like, our safeguards failed here. They said that their guardrails, they found that they degrade over a long conversation. Like, I just don't know that we can, definitely design these systems to be safe because of the way that they work, being a probabilistic technology.
Also, you're asking about personalization and sort of the system is maybe a different system for each person. There's going back to consumer products, what a person wants is not necessarily what industry should provide, because sometimes people want things that are not, society is deemed not helpful. And so, I'm sure personalization has its benefits, but it also has limitations. And I have no idea how to get around the like infinite turns, but, how it gets a little less accurate every time. But just broadly speaking, if you want to buy a car that has no seat belts, you can. So there's a limit to personalization, and I don't know where that limit is, but it has probably not been tested yet.
So is sycophancy an AI-wide problem, or is it an implementation problem at the individual company level, do we feel?
Well, you were saying, and correctly, that they are like, oh, you're supposed to serve these people. You're supposed to be their assistant. You could tell them to be, I've actually I've used open source, I used Quen, and I sort of modified it and to be very grumpy and be, like a character that I had made up for my family. And that character is very unpleasant, and that was not sycophantic in any way, shape, or form. So I think if I can do it very easily, then clearly, I think, remember I was saying that ChatGPT has changed on and off and on and off. I think when I can't put cause and effect exactly together, but when the Rain case was filed, I really do think that it got less sycophantic for a while. And I think that, Altman is tipping that it will go back to that. And so absolutely it can be anything that they want it to be.
You think?
Yeah, it does seem to be a problem in how they have been designed. And I think the problem is part of this is people's expectations when they come to this technology. And it's not very well set up. I mean, there's like people in this room, the fact that you're in this room, I assume that you guys follow AI news. Like you're pretty informed about the AI chatbots. Maybe you have an idea of how the technology works. Like there's a billion people that are using these chatbots now, and a lot of them just don't really have much to index against. Like they just come to it and it says, how can I help you? What can I do for you today? And people just start typing to it. And they don't understand like how it works or how it's powered. And a lot of people see it as this super intelligent oracle. And this is how it's marketed. I mean, they're calling it like PhD level intelligence. So people think that what's coming out of it is incredibly intelligent, can be relied upon. I mean, even lawyers. I mean, you would think lawyers. There's been the famous cases, like the ChatGPT lawyer who hallucinated a case. And you'd think like lawyers would know now, okay, it's gonna hallucinate case law. And yet it keeps happening. They keep filing these things with hallucinations in them. There's now a database online that keeps track of every time this happens. And it keeps happening. And I just think that these would be more sophisticated users who have a famous, famous stories to be aware of, to be careful about. And they're still making these mistakes. So I just think that normal people, it's hard to come to this and know, oh, I can steer this. What I tell this system, it will get into a feedback loop with me. It wants to agree with me. Like they just don't know that about it. And so with the sycophancy that seems to be in the systems and the lack of understanding of most consumers using this, I just think it's a bad combination for some people.
I think the thing that you mentioned about people expecting it to be all-knowing and, this is a genius maybe, or this is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in real life, this is something that has all the answers. I think that's a big, that's an expectations problem, and maybe they set that up with how they describe it, but it is, because it does feel magical at times, it's easy to fall into that trap. And I think that is a big part for me in my perception of why some of these psychosis loops start happening. Because, folks who are predisposed to that kind of thing often want to have somebody validate their feelings or validate their beliefs. And they might come to Kashmir Hill, they might come to a Harvard law professor and say, hey, can you validate my belief in this thing? And we won't. And the all-knowing chatbot does. And I think that is a huge part of why we're talking about AI psychosis.
Is it fair to use that term? Like, are we at the point where we feel like that is a fair and validated term, speaking of validation, to say AI-induced psychosis? Like, are we there, do we think?
I don't use the term. I use delusional spirals, people going into delusional spirals. But I've talked to people who have been institutionalized, like they had psychotic breakdowns that were linked to using the product. Some of them have recovered, some of them haven't, some of them have died. Like there are very serious consequences. And these are people who did not come with known pre-existing conditions. So when I talk to those people, when I talk to their loved ones, I just feel very alarmed to see that happen. But I don't use that term. I just tend to use delusional spirals when I'm talking about it.
Yeah, it's almost certainly not the right term. I don't know what the right term is, but and I don't know cause and effect, but yeah, it isn't the right term, but it's a term that I've heard used. So.
It's the popular imagination has sort of decided that is what it's called.
Also, what I don't like about it is it's so extreme.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of less extreme versions of it. Like I get more emails now. They're often written with ChatGPT. I can tell now when I get a ChatGPT email. And I can see people get convinced. Like they have a kind of minor consumer experience that is annoying. And I can tell that they talked to ChatGPT about it and it got really blown up. And now they're emailing me. They're like, I closed a Microsoft Word document and it didn't save it and I can't recover it. And I think you need to write about this because it's a huge issue that affects everyone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this person just had something annoying happen to them and ChatGPT convinced them that it should be like a front page New York Times story. And so I do wonder the extent to which all of us, if you use these a lot to kind of like think through issues as kind of a sounding board, like how is it moving your thinking? a little bit in a way that maybe is like mildly delusional. And I don't, yeah, it's hard to measure these things. Like, I don't think right now we understand how it helps versus how it hurts and what that ratio is.
I'm not even sure we know how to study this. I don't even know, because it's so personalized. How might we even begin to study that? Study billionaires? See how they're doing? Let's broaden for a moment and talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Reddit forum that's grown. I mean, these are incredibly, possibly just like unprecedented rise in a consumer product. I think it's important to go back and realize, like, this is the thing that has grown the most quickly of anything I've ever seen. I've been writing about consumer products for forever. But what does it mean if an incredibly widespread, widely adopted consumer product is something that people might be in love with and feel like is alive? What do we even do about it? How do we even begin to think about that? I'm gonna start with you, Jordy. Like, is there any legal framework to deal with something like this?
I mean, I think this is part of what makes it so complicated, but I think that I still think we should approach it as a consumer product, because it is a consumer product. It is something that, the AI labs could just sell it to deployers. They could say, we're just not giving this directly to consumers, but consumers are interacting on a daily basis with products, and they're being encouraged to pay for it, and they do pay for it. And so, kind of by definition, it's a consumer product. And the fact that one falls in love with it, I mean, it's not it's way more than a Tamagotchi, it doesn't mean, a pet rock or whatever, doesn't mean that it's not a consumer product. So I think that, like, my personal approach is that legally we should be approaching it as a consumer product first, and then figuring out how to deal with that. And we have some tools in existence to deal with consumer products. And generally speaking, the biggest one is product liability tort. So, like, undoubtedly, many times someone's used these apps and these chatbots, and it has helped them immeasurably. People's lives have been saved by being told, you might have sepsis. Hey, that roof might collapse, clearly. But we're talking about all, bad things, and the bad things are real. And even if the bad things happening are orders of magnitude less common, they still happen. But again, we deal with this all the time with everyday consumer products. So, normally, something bad happens with a consumer product, you can sue, and you can say, hey, this is the thing that you set into the world isn't working, and there's a whole process for dealing with it. Products liability, for those of you who are law students, you may know this, but there's a regime of products liability that makes it fairly less difficult to sue, but software doesn't count unless it's part of hardware. So if you have, like, Rosie the Jetsons robot and it is telling you to kill yourself, then you can sue for that easily. But if it's just software, it's an uphill battle. And so, there have been, in the EU, there was a lot of talk last year, and not just talk, but passing laws, and although they've been kind of backing away from it, to say software should be a product for products liability. The Josh Hawley, Dick Durbin bill that's out now, LEAD Act, is aimed at that. It's just aimed at saying, hey, the tools that we have now should be used, because, when something bad happens to Adam Rain or to someone else, we shouldn't make it as hard as possible for them to seek redress. And the way products liability works is, when something is dangerous and is found to be dangerous, they get sued, they lose, and they change it. And they change it to make it safer. And so, this is why, I think things like that, I may not frequently agree with either Josh Hawley or Dick Durbin, but having products liability cover software, it's like a low-hanging fruit that would really help. But it doesn't mean, it's not a panacea.
All right, so we're at the time where we'd love to begin to take some questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions over here.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on the recent California AI companion chatbot law. Do you think there's any teeth there? What do you think it kind of misses about the overall problems that we're facing?
I think it's good that they passed something, but the headline feature of that chatbot law is that the chatbot needs to say over and over and over, hey, I'm a chatbot, I'm not human. And I just think that could even be counterproductive. We were just talking about how people think of these things as like superhuman. Like a reminder that it's a superhuman isn't necessarily, to me, really effective. And other elements of the law, do help with creating private rights of action where people can sue, and that's better. But every time we come up with a regulation, or there's a new technology, we really struggle to figure out how to deal with it. So like when the car came out, there was these red flag laws where when you went through a town, you had to get out of the car, and then you had to wave a red flag to warn off all the horses, and then not very effective. And we're at that moment of regulation. And so like I welcome regulations that are ineffective because at least we're trying. But I think that one is pretty ineffective.
I'm interested to see how it plays out. I will say when I have seen these transcripts where somebody is in kind of companionship role or thinks they're talking to a sentient AI, how these companies choose to design the kind of notice is important, because when the notice kind of comes out of nowhere, like, I think you need to talk to a mental health professional, I'm concerned, or just a reminder, I'm an AI chatbot. Often these people see a distinction between what they're talking to and the formal notice from the company. And they think like, oh, well, my AI is sentient, but that is the parent company, like, trying to convince, trying to separate us. So just how are they designing it in there? Is it a performative, just a reminder, this is an AI chatbot, or is it in the design of what that can say, like how deep the relationship can go? I just think it's a little bit more, it's complicated in terms of how this actually plays out in terms of people using the software.
Go for it.
Professor Joe Weizenbaum at MIT wrote the very first one of these things about 55 years ago, and he watched the behavior of the users, and they developed parasocial relationships with it, and that he found that alarming and wrote a whole book with a chapter on that subject. The people who are building these things and marketing them and selling them now, are they aware of any of that history? And if they are, why are they ignoring it?
We can only surmise what they know. I don't know. I know a number of folks who are in industry who make a lot of decisions, and you probably do too. But they're often highly informed people, and I don't know what they do with that information. It doesn't, just because they read it and are aware of it, doesn't mean that they're going to be moved by it, because the types of people who succeed in that world aren't necessarily the ones who would be moved by it.
I think it's a great question. I do think like the Eliza effect was not something that really got bandied about until the last year or two. I will say I have checked like the developer forums on OpenAI, and I have seen some references to it in like a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's just a hard question to answer. I think that when these companies first started building this software, this is not what they thought they were building. Like the Eliza chatbot was performing, being a psychotherapist and asking, it would just like basically just gave a script of tell me more about that. How do you feel about that? And people really got very engaged with this to the point where Weizenbaum's secretary was like, can you step out of the room so I can talk to the chatbot? This is like 1962. It's like such a basic computer program, and yet people were very emotionally engaged by it. But I think like when these companies were first building the software, they were thinking it was more of like a more powerful Google search. Like, I don't know if they knew they were gonna build into this direction, and maybe there was not an awareness that when you give people a chat interface, this is where we go. Like, we wanna talk about who we are and how we feel and what we think, and that is inevitably the direction it's gonna go, because like as humans, I think what we privilege above all things is like how we feel about the world. But yeah, it's a good question.
It's a really good question. I would say that like I edited a story like 2 years ago where that was the lead of it. So I don't know, if they read Wired, they've known at least for 2 years. That's my best answer for you.
I think I have the mic. Thank you for being here. I'm fascinated by this experiment of having AI make all your decisions for a week. Can you talk more about that and what some of your takeaways were, and especially about parenting decisions, how that worked out?
Yeah. So I honestly thought that the week was gonna be more absurd than it was. And I was excited to write about like my wild week having AI make decisions for me. It was actually pretty good. It was pretty good at making decisions, generally made like good decisions. There was a couple of things that hallucinated, like I'd be like, what restaurant should I go to and what should I order? And it would choose the right restaurant, but hallucinate like what was available there. What my takeaways from the week were one, like it was yes man technology. If I said, should I have a beer while I make dinner? It would always be like, sure, go for it. It would only push back on, like one day I was like, I've already had 3 coffees, should I have a 4th? And it was like, maybe not a good idea. And I was like, but I really need it. And it was like, okay. So I definitely picked up on the sycophancy. What really struck me was that I felt so boring asking AI to make decisions for me, because it was just giving me like the most basic advice. I was like, what color should I paint my office? And it said paint it taupe. You know, I was like, how should I cut my hair? And it told me get a bob. Like, it just gave me the kind of like, here's the average of what humanity has, like this is what you should do. And I wasn't pushing back. I wasn't being like, give me something edgier. I just was just like, what is it telling me? When it told me to buy groceries, it was just like all really healthy food. And I was like, well, I want some snacks. And it said, get almonds and dark chocolate. Like, it just, it felt like it was flattening me out. And there was this one really interesting study that somebody told me about where they had writers all write stories, and half the writers used ChatGPT to help them and the others didn't. And then they had people judge them. And the judges found that the people who used ChatGPT individually were more creative in the stories that they came up with. But as a group, they were less creative because they had all converged on the same kinds of ideas that were offered up by ChatGPT. And so that was kind of my takeaway. If we all start kind of like turning to these systems to make our decisions for us, we're all gonna kind of converge on the same things. And I think we see it, you know, at universities when students are turning in papers, professors, I've written about professors also using ChatGPT for their work, and you kind of start getting this voice that's the same for everybody. And so I kind of worry about that, where it just, sends us all in the same direction, and we all start, which is something that's already probably like happening to a certain extent. If you're a parent, you have all the same kind of baby gear that everyone else got on Amazon. Like, we get steered in certain directions, but I think AI can really exacerbate that, accelerate that. Making Jay go all over here.
Hi. So my question is actually, well, maybe kind of big, but I was wondering what you think about this current initiative called the Statement on Superintelligence, also in the context of this conversation. So there are many people now, scientists, politicians, calling for a ban on AI. We've had a ban, I think, initiated by Elon Musk. Everybody signed. nothing happened. Everybody did, their own thing. But now there is this new kind of initiative, and again, an attempt to ban artificial intelligence, and it's kind of focused on super intelligence and very futuristic topics. But it seems to me that what you're discussing here are very relevant and very timely issues that are focused on the technology that we already have, not a technology that is coming. And so do you feel like, what do you make of that? Why are we even referring to superintelligence where we have so much at stake already today in terms of social impact of this technology? Thank you.
I think those kinds of statements, they have a limited use in that they can sort of share for others that they're concerned, but they're somewhat performative, and yeah, I don't think that they have any lasting impact unless, I don't know. I tend to think that for something like a ban on superintelligence research to happen, it's going to be because something really bad happens. It's not going to be because a bunch of people signed a thing. And so, yeah, I think it's just a blip for me.
Yeah, just as a journalist, I'm just a little bit more focused on the problems right now happening to the humans here today who are using the systems. And so I'd like to see us address these problems. Yeah, and I think sometimes when you get too focused on like what the future risks are, we get distracted from the harms that are in the now that we need to deal with.
Great. I want to take a couple questions from online.
Great.
So one, if sycophancy might be an inherent quality of chatbots, particularly those that are given the context of being assistant or companion, can we instead look at the ways in which sycophancy can be harmful and approach the problem from that angle? And sort of a follow-up with that is the problem the sycophancy itself or our failure to acknowledge that this is a hard problem to solve?
Well, one problem with sycophancy is that, yeah, it steers you away from the truth. Not that these systems are designed to give you the truth. They're word association engines that a lot of time work really well. I think the bigger problem with sycophancy is human psychology and how addictive something that validates you and offers this kind of endless empathy and support and reinforcement of what you think, like how you can get drawn into that system. So I think of it as dangerous in that way, and a problem in that way.
Yeah, it's the billionaire problem, and if we can, if this moment can help us understand more about that, and obviously there must be, I don't know psychology research, but there must be psychology research from before this on if you're always told yes, how does that impact you? But there's other, it could be beyond sycophancy. The problems here can be due to manipulation, or there's all kinds of elements at play. So I think further exploration of sycophancy and its impact on people, I'm all for. But it is very complicated, I think.
I tend to think about it in the framework of that it's a thing that never gets tired of you. It never gets bored. It never has anything else to do. It doesn't understand time. It's not a person. And so if you are able to engage in something that's creating some kind of dopamine with it that never sleeps, it's like, I think a metaphor that makes sense is a casino, right? There's no clock on it. I think, what you were saying about, 7-8 hours a day, I don't know that there's anything other than work that we do 7 or 8 hours a day that's like meant to be okay for us to do that much of. So the unlimited nature of it and the way that it'll never really say no to you combined, I think is something that, to your point, is an experiment on us that hasn't existed before. There's never really been anything like that. And so I think it's almost problematic to study that. You don't want to put people in a situation where they're spending that much time with anything. So it's a challenge.
Great, I'll take one more from online. Other than regulation, are there other societal mechanisms that can be invoked to change the incentives for the AI companies so that they build products that don't send people down their own personalized rabbit holes?
Thank you.
only the ones that I'm thinking about. So first of all, I'm big into torts and lawsuits and their influence on companies, and that's actually not regulatory. And so, that can come from just an individual with a problem. And so that is a non-regulatory mechanism. And, regulations are proactive and often wrong, as we've discussed before. So that's possible. There's other things that you could do which would require regulation, but it's not saying what you can and can't do, but like, for example, making the companies have a fiduciary duty to their users. So that means that like, hey, we treat it like a lawyer, we treat it like a therapist, we treat it like an accountant. Lawyers, therapists, and accountants all have fiduciary duties to us. And a fiduciary duty means that they owe fidelity to the user. You can't put yourself, when you're a lawyer, you're not allowed to put yourself above your client's interest. If the AI companies had a legal duty to not put themselves ahead of the interests of their users, they would perhaps act differently. And they resist this, but it's not like lawyers and accountants don't make a lot of money. So there's a way to do it in an economically rewarding way. But there was a big movement, or somewhat of a movement, to have social media platforms have a fiduciary relationship. There was bipartisan proposals in the House and the Senate, but they were killed. And there's definitely a background talk now about AI and having fiduciary responsibilities. And I think that would be helpful.
I do wonder about like the larger societal forces that are causing this, the people that are spending so much time with these chatbots, like they are lonely, they are isolated, they have 8 hours a day to talk to a chatbot. Like these kind of, and this goes back to social media, like problems with social media, that just kind of this question of our relationship to technology and how prominent it is, how we prioritize it over human relationships. So the extent to which we want to design against that. And you could imagine, a very, human-centered AI company that instead of trying to get you to talk to its bot for many hours a day was trying to get you to connect with other human beings. Like, oh, you're interested in that? Maybe you should go to this, group of people who are talking, like more kind of pushing people away from the tech and toward each other. That is like a larger issue that I think a lot about, as a parent who is, deciding, do I'm going to spend time with my phone or with my kids, and just kind of like, what kind of society have we created that this technology is so alluring to people in it?
I think we have maybe time for one more question.
So my question is, you mentioned before the issues of people not really understanding what the chatbot can do, what the issues around it, and I was just wondering what your thoughts on how to educate the public, how to get that information out, what you think a way that would be there to try to increase awareness of how AI works and what it can and can't do and what the risks are and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, experts I've talked to say there should be more AI literacy that's built into these systems. I'm trying, I'm writing stories, a lot of journalists are writing stories, trying to make people aware of the limitations and risks. I would hope it would be kind of built into the platforms more. There are disclosures, at the bottom of every conversation you have with the chatbot, it says some variation of it can make mistakes, this is not, definitely reliable. But I think those are small, and I don't think they're very effective. I don't think that works. So yeah, and I just tell people, ask your friends, are you talking to chatbots? What do you talk about? How much do you rely on them? Just kind of talking to the people around you, and getting a sense of the role that this thing is playing in their life. Just talking about it more. I think I've been talking a lot to therapists who are now trying to make this part of their practice, to ask, oh, do you talk to chatbots? How do you use them? Just making this part of the conversation that we have with each other.
obviously just, awareness grows over time, but I'm also not 100% sold that awareness on its own is going to help a lot, because I think, for example, in social media, a lot of people are aware of the problems of social media, and yet they still engage with it. And it becomes, because the utility of the tool, for whatever individual purpose, is high enough to someone that they use it despite knowing that it may not be good for them. And I think that I wouldn't be shocked at all if in 5 years that people think of chatbots the way a lot of people across the spectrum think about social media now, and yet we'll still use them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, our panelists. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. You shall be.